Basically what I want to do now is to log into the machine as the administrator, and from here I need to access my installation files. Okay, and then in the Mi-DevEnv folder there's the initialization folder, and in the initialization folder is a batch file. That batch file actually executes a PowerShell script which goes and does all the great work for us, which is to set the registry settings and so on. But basically running this batch file makes sure that PowerShell is set up in the right way, which is really to do with execution policy. So we can see here it's set to bypass. And now the registry settings are in place so that when this machine is rebooted, it automatically logs on as the administrator, and the registry key for run once is set, so that it will actually sysprep itself. So Mi-DevEnv has now shut that machine down, and the important thing to note is we don't want to switch this particular machine on, because obviously if we do, it will sysprep itself. What we want to do is to actually make copies of this template or use it as a base image to create virtual machines, and switch those virtual machines on so that all those sysprep activities occur inside of that machine, not inside of the template. So what I'm going to do next is to copy this MDE base server 2012 template drive to the place where I want my Mi-DevEnv template drives stored. So I'll locate the MDE base SRV 2012 drive, so that matches the name of this virtual machine up here. We'll take a copy of that and we'll place it in the VM store MDE root folder under the templates folder, and then paste. Okay, now that we have that copy of the template safe, what we need to do next is to go back to Mi-DevEnv, into the initialization folder, and this is where we now store our sysprep response files. The sysprep response files that I've created are very simple. There's not really a great deal of detail in them, and if you're interested, by all means open them up and have a look. But what we would need to do is to copy this sysprep template paste it, and then do a rename so that the name of the sysprep file is the same as the template. And that just helps when we're specifying parameters later on how to create the virtual machine. Mi-DevEnv can assume that the sysprep file has the same name effectively as the template base image. The other thing that we're going to want to do is to create a product key copy. So for example, in here we have an MDE server 2012 entry, which is the product key for server 2012. And once your product key is set in your product key file, if you make a copy of that server 2012 key, and again call this product key the same as the base template drive. And again, this just makes your command line very short, because by default, whenever we use this base template that we've just created, Mi-DevEnv will assume that the product key can be looked at from this file using the base template drive's name, and that will just make things really efficient for when you come to create the virtual machines. Okay, what I can do now is skip forward a little bit. And ultimately what we're going to do is run this test script. But before we do that, I'm just going to show you what the results of the test script are. So what the test script does is, first of all, it creates a domain controller and it creates two web servers. The first web server is based on Windows Server 2008 R2. The second is based on Windows Server 2012. Okay, so let's take a look at the test script which creates the virtual machines that we've just run down there. The script is a little bit configurable. First of all, the cleanup variable says if the virtual machines exist, delete them. Create a domain controller. Create a first web server which will be based on 2008 R2. And create a second web server which is based on Server 2012. The script then outputs some headings and some trace information so that we know that it's deleting the machines. So this simple command here removes the domain controller if it exists, removes the first web server if it exists, and removes the 2012 server if it exists, and no confirmation is requested. So bear in mind that this is the kind of script that you can create quite simply to tear down and completely recreate a test environment. But bear in mind, if this was a development environment, we wouldn't want to delete the virtual machines without confirmation, because there might be source code which is not being checked in, or some other valuable assets. So then there's a few if statements to say if we're creating a domain controller, then execute the command which creates the domain controller and installs the necessary packages. If we are going to create a domain controller, when we create the web server, the script needs to wait until it thinks the domain controller setup will be complete, which is, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 minutes later in this case. Once that sleep period has passed, we then say build a couple of web servers, and the Server 2008 server will have these features installed as server roles and features, and these software packages installed. So without me having to make any input, the virtual machine will be set up with all of the roles and features that I require. It will then be promoted to be a web server. It will have SQL 2012 installed, CRM 2011, Visual Studio 2012 Ultimate Edition, Office 2010, and then some developer settings will be applied, such as turning off user account control and so on. So because we've told the script to create the web server, it will execute this line and it will create the virtual machine, and then it will drop down and it will immediately start to create the second web server, which is based on Windows Server 2012. So here we can see some evidence that we can create virtual machines in parallel where they're not dependent on each other. So this starts to give you some idea that Mi-DevEnv really could be the core of some kind of micro cloud offering for developers, or self-service offering for test environment controllers. Once all of the virtual machine setup is complete, then there's a cleanup phase where some internal drive mappings which Mi-DevEnv creates are removed, but then the test script ends. So you can see by writing a PowerShell script like this, it's possible to create in a few lines a complete development environment, or tear down and recreate a complete test environment. the script can remove all of the machines which are created and then recreate them afresh. You're able to use some really nice PowerShell features such as variables to store common settings that you need and software packages that you'd like to install, so that when you create machines, all you need to say is give me some verbose output so I can see what's going on, understand that this is what I want the machine to be called, how much RAM the machine should be assigned, what the base template is for the drive, and then what these packages are that I want installed, and what the features and roles are that I'd like to be installed. And in this one line, the complete virtual machine creation and product installation and setup is done for us. Okay, let's now run this script, and what we'll see is these virtual machines down here will get blown away and recreated. So we get some trace information to say the machines have been deleted, and indeed they've disappeared there from Hyper-V. And then the verbose trace of the server creation process tells us that the setup has been complete of the virtual machine, that the drive for the virtual machine has been mounted, and Mi-DevEnv has been copied and configured inside of that virtual machine drive. That virtual machine drive is then dismounted and the virtual machine is created and attached to that virtual drive, and then the virtual machine is started. So I can see now in Hyper-V the machine is already starting up. And remember what we did some moments ago was we created a Server 2012 image. Well, this virtual machine is based on a Server 2008 R2 image that I created some time ago. And then I ran that trigger script which shut the machine down. So now this virtual machine is based on a copy of that virtual drive, and it's switched on, and what that does is it tells the machine to log itself in and run the sysprep process. Now this isn't too exciting, but I'm going to let the process continue. Feel free to fast forward at this point, but what you'll see now is that the sysprep phase will complete, and in 5 minutes or so after that phase is complete, the software packages that were required to be installed will commence. In this particular case, this stage of the script is creating a domain controller, so it's going to install Active Directory domain services, and that will create a domain called dev. The name of that domain, dev, was taken from the Mi-DevEnv parameter file which we looked at a few minutes ago. So now you can see how the dots are starting to connect, that having set those parameters up and logged the product keys in that product file, our Windows operating system activation keys and our product activation keys are all in one place. Our parameters which describe other settings such as network settings and organizational names and organizational units and so on are all captured in one place. And now that they've been specified once, I can use them forever, and only occasionally will I need to tweak them. So what we see now is that this virtual machine has gone through the first phase of sysprep. The second phase of sysprep will assign the machine's name. Once that's done, the machine will reboot itself again, and Mi-DevEnv will then continue to run an install suite, and that install suite detects the packages which were requested in our test script, and one by one it will go through and install the requested software development tools and products required. So we see the sysprep process continue. What this is doing is assigning the machine name. It's created a new SID, so this machine is completely unique to me as a developer. So if I have 5 or 6 or more developers all run this script, each of them will create a new domain controller. But there's an interesting thing to watch there, that the static IP for those domain controllers will all be 10.1.1.40 as specified in my parameter file. So each developer would have at least had to go and change that IP address. But that's probably about the only thing that they would have to change.